The storm clouds gathering over the Nebraska Territory in 1887 seemed to mirror the turmoil in Samuel Thornton's life. He stood on the porch of his sprawling ranch house, watching his two daughters play half-heartedly in the yard, their laughter hollow and forced. It had been 8 months since consumption had taken their mother, and in those 8 months, Samuel had watched his girls fade like flowers denied water. They needed more than he could give them. They needed a mother's touch, a woman's gentle guidance, the softness that his calloused hands and gruff manner could never provide. Samuel was not a poor man. His cattle ranch stretched across thousands of acres, and his herds were among the finest in the territory. He had built an empire from nothing, arriving as a young man with only determination and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. Money was not his problem. His problem was that wealth could not buy back the dead, could not fill the void in his daughter's eyes, could not teach 7-year-old Emma how to braid her hair or comfort 5-year-old Sarah when she woke crying from nightmares about her mama. The town's respectable widows had made their interest known, circling like well-dressed vultures, but Samuel saw through their practiced smiles. They wanted his money, his status, his fine house. They looked at his daughters as obstacles to be managed rather than children to be loved. He had attended church socials and town gatherings, had endured awkward conversations and transparent schemes, but none of it felt right. He was beginning to lose hope when he heard about the woman at the boarding house. Her name was Catherine Chen, though some in town called her by crueler names. She had arrived 3 months earlier as a mail-order bride for a prominent businessman named Howard Westfield. The whole town had buzzed with scandal when Westfield, upon meeting her at the train station, had taken one look at her Chinese features and publicly renounced the arrangement. He had claimed the marriage broker had deceived him, that he had been expecting a proper American woman, and he refused to honor his commitment. Catherine had been left stranded with nowhere to go, no money for passage back to San Francisco, and no family to turn to. The charitable ladies of the town had initially rallied to help her, finding her a room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house and offering her menial work. But charity in frontier towns was often conditional, and Catherine's presence made people uncomfortable. She was too foreign, too different, a reminder of a world beyond their understanding. The work dried up, and the invitations to church stopped coming. Mrs. Henderson had begun making pointed comments about unpaid rent. Catherine had become an outcast, visible but unseen, present but unwelcome. Samuel had noticed her in town, a slender figure in a worn dress, always walking with her head high despite the whispers that followed her. There was a dignity in her bearing that impressed him, a refusal to be broken by circumstances that would have crushed a weaker person. He had seen her once with a child who had fallen in the street, the gentle way she had helped the little boy up and checked him for injuries before his mother had rushed over and pulled the child away as if Catherine carried disease. The incident had stayed with him. On a cold November evening, with winter approaching and his daughters growing more withdrawn each day, Samuel made a decision. He drove his wagon into town and stopped at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. The landlady greeted him with surprise and obvious curiosity, but when he asked to speak with Miss Chen, her expression turned disapproving. Nevertheless, she called Catherine down to the parlor, then made herself scarce, though Samuel suspected she was listening from the hallway. Catherine descended the stairs slowly, her face carefully composed but her eyes wary. She was younger than he had realized, perhaps 25, with delicate features and hair pinned simply at the nape of her neck. Her dress was clean but threadbare, mended in several places with tiny, almost invisible stitches. She stood before him with the same dignity he had observed from a distance, waiting for him to speak. Samuel was not a man comfortable with elaborate speeches. He believed in plain dealing, in laying cards on the table and letting people make informed choices. So he told her the truth. His daughters needed a mother. He needed a wife, not for companionship or love, but for the practical purpose of creating a proper home for his children. He could offer her security, shelter, food, and respect. In return, he asked that she care for his daughters, manage his household, and bear the Thornton name. It would be a marriage of convenience, a business arrangement, but it would be legal and binding, and he would honor his commitment to her regardless of what anyone in town thought. "I need a mother for my girls," he said bluntly, "and you need shelter. I'm offering a fair exchange. You'll want for nothing material, and I'll ask nothing from you except kindness to my daughters and competent management of my home. I won't pretend this is a love match. I loved my wife, and she's gone. But I can promise you respect, protection, and a home where you won't be judged or cast out." Catherine listened without interruption, her face revealing nothing of her thoughts. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she asked, in English more fluent than he had expected, about his daughters. What were their names? How old were they? What did they like? What were their temperaments? Samuel found himself talking about Emma and Sarah in a way he had not done since their mother died, describing Emma's love of stories and Sarah's fascination with the horses, their fears and their sorrows and the light that had gone out of them. Catherine asked if the children knew about his plan. Samuel admitted they did not. She asked if she could meet them before giving her answer. He agreed, surprised and somewhat impressed by her conditions. They arranged that he would bring the girls to town the following day, to the general store, and Catherine would happen to be there. It would seem like a chance meeting, nothing that would raise hopes or create awkwardness if she ultimately declined his offer. The next day, Samuel brought Emma and Sarah to town on the pretense of buying supplies. As planned, Catherine was at the general store, examining fabric she could not afford to buy. When Sarah accidentally knocked over a display of ribbon spools, it was Catherine who helped the little girl pick them up, and in doing so, she began to talk with both children. Samuel watched from a distance as she showed them how to make a cat's cradle with string, her fingers moving gracefully as she created intricate patterns. Emma was entranced, and even Sarah, normally so withdrawn, was smiling. Catherine spent nearly an hour with the girls, never once speaking to Samuel directly, maintaining the fiction of coincidental encounter. She listened more than she talked, drawing the children out with gentle questions and genuine interest. When it was time to leave, both Emma and Sarah begged their father to let them visit with the nice lady again. Samuel promised they might, his eyes meeting Catherine's over his daughters' heads. In that glance, a question was asked and answered. That evening, Catherine sent word through Mrs. Henderson that she accepted his proposal. They were married 3 days later by a justice of the peace, with only Mrs. Henderson and the justice's wife as witnesses. It was a brief, businesslike ceremony that took less than 15 minutes. Samuel gave Catherine a simple gold band, and she became Mrs. Thornton, for better or worse. The reaction in town was immediate and ugly. Howard Westfield, the man who had rejected Catherine, was vocal in his disgust that Samuel had stooped to marrying a Chinese woman. The church ladies were scandalized. Even some of Samuel's fellow ranchers expressed disapproval or made crude jokes about his choice of bride. Samuel met all criticism with stony silence and continued about his business, making it clear through his demeanor that his personal life was not open for discussion or debate. At the ranch, Catherine transformed from mail-order bride reject to rancher's wife with remarkable grace. She approached her new life with the same quiet dignity she had maintained through her hardships. The house, which had become dusty and disordered in the months since his wife's death, began to shine again. But more importantly, the children began to bloom under her care. Catherine never tried to replace their mother or force affection. Instead, she simply made herself available, a constant gentle presence in their lives. She taught Emma to braid her hair in the mornings, sitting patiently while the little girl's fingers fumbled with the unfamiliar task. She told both girls stories from her childhood in China, tales of dragons and brave princesses that captivated them. She made special treats in the kitchen, introducing them to sweet rice cakes and other delicacies from her homeland. Most importantly, she listened to them with complete attention, making them feel heard and valued. Samuel kept to his word about their arrangement. He treated Catherine with respect, gave her authority over the household, and defended her against any criticism from outsiders. Their relationship was polite, formal, built on mutual respect rather than affection. They inhabited the same house like courteous strangers sharing space, each fulfilling their agreed-upon role. But as autumn turned to winter and winter slowly gave way to spring, something unexpected began to happen. Samuel found himself looking forward to dinner not just for the food, but for Catherine's quiet company. He noticed the way she hummed while she worked, the competent grace of her movements, the intelligence in her eyes when they discussed ranch business. She had opinions about herd management and crop rotation, and her suggestions were often remarkably sound. She had a dry wit that occasionally emerged in her observations, making him laugh in a way he had not done in years. Catherine, for her part, found in Samuel something she had not expected: fundamental decency. He worked hard, treated his employees fairly, and loved his daughters with a fierce protectiveness that moved her. He never raised his voice to her, never made her feel lesser, never demanded more than their agreement stipulated. He had given her safety when she had none, respect when the world offered only scorn, and a purpose when she had felt utterly lost. The girls were the bridge between them. Emma and Sarah adored their new mother, and in caring for them, Samuel and Catherine found common ground. They consulted about the children's education, worried together when Sarah caught a fever, celebrated when Emma read her first complete book. They became partners in parenting, and from that partnership, something deeper began to grow. One evening in late spring, nearly 6 months after their marriage, Samuel came in from the fields to find Catherine sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. Without thinking, he sat beside her, and they remained there in comfortable silence as the sky turned gold and pink. It was Catherine who finally spoke, saying quietly that she had never imagined she could be happy again after everything that had happened, but she was. Samuel found himself admitting the same, that he had thought his capacity for happiness had died with his first wife, but somehow it had returned. They turned to look at each other, really seeing each other perhaps for the first time since their businesslike wedding. And in that moment, both realized that what had started as a practical arrangement had become something neither had dared to hope for: a real marriage, built not on passion or romance, but on something potentially more enduring: respect, partnership, and genuine care. Samuel reached out and took Catherine's hand, and she let him, her fingers curling around his. They sat there as the stars emerged, two people who had found each other in desperate circumstances and built something real from necessity. Inside the house, they could hear Emma and Sarah playing, their laughter genuine and free. The sound was the best evidence of what they had created together: a true home, built on the foundation of a practical proposal but sustained by something far more valuable: authentic love, slowly grown and deeply rooted.